In today's video, I'm going to be going over the most overrated player on every NBA team, which essentially means I am setting myself up for failure. There is no way that I actually have 33 names on this list, that I can say 33 names, call them overrated, and no one take issue with that. So, to that end, this video is inherently going to piss some people off. All I ask is that you understand that A, overrated does not mean bad. B, overrated is a scale, and some player can be extremely overrated and some can be extremely underrated. C, where am I going with this? What a player is rated is entirely based on how fans and media talk about them and not an actual reflection of that player's abilities. And yeah, this isn't a big deal. It's basketball, so don't crucify me. All right, that's it. Roll the intro. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you've fallen into the 50%, then please subscribe. I am trying to hit 300,000 subscribers on this channel by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also drop a like, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. Starting off in the Eastern Conference. For the Chicago Bulls, I have 2 players to pick here, and that is Javonte Green and Nikola Vucevic. Sometimes a player is overrated within a fan base and then just not really known outside of it, and another player cannot be really known to be struggling when they are because they're not a part of that fan base. So it's kind of both sides of the coin here, where Nikola Vucevic has been terrible this year, and Bulls fans are well aware of that, and they're crucifying him as a result. But a lot of fans outside of the Bulls fan base aren't really aware just how bad Vucevic has been this year, so to that end, he's overrated by the general NBA populace. Javonte Green, however, on the Chicago Bulls, a lot of people treat him like he's some god-tier role player. He's fine. He's good enough to be in the rotation for like 20 minutes a game. He hits his open threes even though it's no volume, and his perimeter defense is pretty alright. But he's not that great at finishing at the rim, and he makes a couple of plays where it's like, you're really not the guy to be trying to make that play. He's fine, but a lot of Bulls fans act like he's a saving grace or like he should be starting at power forward, even though Derrick Jones Jr. is clearly miles better. And that's frustrating to me, so that's why he's here. For the Miami Heat, I decided to go with Duncan Robinson. This is kind of a similar situation to Nikola Vucevic. Heat fans know that Duncan Robinson has been bad this year, but people outside of the Heat fan base probably aren't really keeping too much track of Duncan Robinson's three-point percentage, so not so much attention paid to that, and thus his reputation stays relatively intact. But Duncan Robinson has really struggled this year, and thus he's not as good as something I'd say the average NBA fan probably thinks he is. For the Brooklyn Nets, here's where we step right into controversy: Kevin Durant. It's probably well known at this point that I have believed for a long time that Kevin Durant's on-court ability is just a tad overrated. And with him, it really is just a tad, just simply because I feel like a lot of people say, like, without hesitation that Kevin Durant is the best player in the league. And I'm sorry, he just hasn't been leaps or bounds better than Giannis, leaps or bounds better than Steph when he isn't playing awful, which he's done for the last like 20 games and is really starting to get concerning. But Steph before that is not leaps and bounds better than that, not leaps and bounds better than Jokic, probably not even that many leaps and bounds better than LeBron. So to that end, when so many people act as though he is clearly number one, when I don't think he has played well enough to make that separation, I say he's a little overrated. Now, is it absolutely nitpicking when we're talking about a player of his caliber? Yes, but when we're talking about the best player in the league conversation, you have to nitpick. It's the whole reason I made a video on why he's not the best player in the league. It all is nitpicky stuff, but that's, at the end of the day, that stuff is a little slept on. And when people say he's number one without hesitation, like it's clearly him, like he's obviously the best player in the world, I think that's foolish. So, overrated. And I think that happens enough for him to be overrated. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, this one I hate to do because he's had a very unfortunate year, but that is Colin Sexton. Colin Sexton, I have been of the opinion for a while. If you are a 6'1", 6'2", if we're being generous, guard who is not an elite three-point shooter. He's had good percentages, but his volume's been really low. Not an elite playmaker and not an elite defender, and really the way you get your offense is drives and mid-range pull-ups, and then again, solid enough three-point shooting, but not elite at it. If you are a small guard, you need to be really good at three-point shooting, especially off of the dribble, and playmaking, and he is not great at either of those two things. So that means there is a very serious ceiling on how good and how impactful Colin Sexton is actually capable of being. Now, not to say he's bad, but like a bunch of people acting like he's going to be a perennial all-star or something like that, absolutely not. 22, 24 even on relatively good efficiency, it's nice, but because of his height limitation, because of his playmaking limitation, because of his shooting limitation, his actual value is not as high. Especially put that in contrast to Darius Garland, who is a small guard just like Colin Sexton, but is a great playmaker, is a great three-point shooter, especially on the pull-up. And you see the difference in value of a player that small. I've been of the opinion for a long time Darius Garland is going to be better than Colin Sexton, and this year he has absolutely been that. I feel bad saying this though, because Colin Sexton was due to not get a max contract, but definitely get some sort of payday, at least somewhere in the 20 millions. And then he had a serious season-ending injury, and that's probably going to affect his bag, and you never want to see that. So hopefully it doesn't ruin the money that he can get too much. But yeah. For the Milwaukee Bucks, I am Brook Lopez's biggest hater. I will happily take this crown because nobody else really cares enough about Brook Lopez to be his biggest hater. I keep saying I've been in the opinion for a while. Brook Lopez is just not that important for Milwaukee, and he was his first year there and his second year there. The third year, not so much, and especially on that championship run, they've been perfectly fine without him. With Bobby Portis at the center position, their defense has been better, their three-point shooting has been better, and their versatility is better. They're just a better team, I think, without him. And a lot of people have been saying like, oh, Milwaukee needs a trade for a center. No, they don't. They're doing just fine without Brook Lopez. They do not need to trade for a center. When he comes back and he's their backup, which he should be their backup, then their center position is fine. For the Sixers, I could not think of a single name on this roster that is overrated. The only one I could kind of maybe think was Shake Milton. And that was only for like, if you are living 2 years ago when like Shake Milton seemed like he was going to be the savior of the team when he got in the starting lineup in place of Al Horford. But since then, he's just been an okay NBA player. Sometimes not the best decision making on his part. But I'd say the average NBA fan probably isn't really overrating Shake Milton like that. I just couldn't look at anyone else on this roster and say there was even a chance they were overrated. So Shake Milton is just the pick, I guess. But I really... nah. For the Hornets, I'm going with Mason Plumlee. Now, I will attest that probably most people don't think Mason Plumlee is very good, but I'll just say myself that I have vouched for Mason Plumlee as a really, really, really good backup center before, and now, even though obviously he's starting and that's too much for him, I still feel like he's been so bad this year, I wouldn't even count on him being a good backup. So, he was overrated by me. Mason Plumlee is awful for the Hornets. And I apologize for ever saying that he would be otherwise, because when they made that trade, I was like, yeah, it's a pretty good center. They've needed a pretty good center for a while. No, he's been fucking awful. He's been no better than fucking Cody Zeller was. So yeah, that's my bad. For the Washington Wizards, again, this is one that's like a barely overrated player, but I couldn't really think of anyone else, and that is Montrezl Harrell. Montrez just has less impact as a center that doesn't play good defense. Very few centers can get away with just being poor defenders, and the ones that do are like elite offensive players, like Nikola Jokic before this year. Now he's actually a good defender. Nikola Vucevic, even though he's okay, before this there were times where he was just straight up bad and he was still very impactful. Other example being like Karl Anthony Towns, even though again, all three of the guys that I just said are a little better defensively than they get credit for, but you can be a poor defensive center if your offense is really, really, really good. Montrezl Harrell's offense is good, but it's not quite on that tier to where his impact is a little bit lower than you would probably like it to be. For the Toronto Raptors, this is a really weird one, but I'm going to go with Precious Achiuwa. Again, this is an example where I really couldn't think of someone who was overrated all that much. And not even by Raptors fans, because I see Raptors fans on Twitter shit on him all the time, although Raptors fans kind of are a very mixed bag of, they're just a very aggressive fan base, let's put it that way. Precious Achiuwa was someone that I thought a lot of Heat fans overrated before he went to Toronto. And they kind of have done a similar thing with like KZ Okpala, where I don't know, there's this weird thing with Heat fans where they choose one young player and they're like, oh my god, this guy. I'm kind of afraid they're going to start doing that with Omer Yurtseven. When I was on the Omer Yurtseven train when he was killing it in the Summer League and he's been good in the NBA, But I don't know where I'm going with this. Basically, some Heat fans overrated Precious, like acted like he was some amazing prospect. He's shot like 40% from the field this year as a center, which is not good. So he's not that great, and a lot of Heat fans acted like he was going to be that great. That said, he's really young, and I'm not saying there's not room for him to get there, and I don't think he's like some drastically overrated player. It's just the only one I could really think of with the Raptors. I used to go with Pascal Siakam, but Pascal now has been considered overrated for so long that he's now underrated because he's played like an all-star this year and nobody's talking about it, even though obviously the Raptors are really only going to get one all-star spot, and that's going to go to Fred VanVleet, but I digress. For the Boston Celtics, Marcus Smart has been living off of reputation for a while now. Marcus Smart defensively has not been the same the last 2 seasons. His offense continues to be frustrating when he tries to do too much for what he's capable of. And for him to continue to be treated like this S-tier role player when he has not played like that over the last 2 seasons now is a little unfair. I will say his playmaking has been really, really good this year and the best it's ever been of his career, but that's really the only upswing that he's had over the last 2 seasons. For the Knicks, Julius Randle almost did not make my pick, but I really couldn't think of anybody else. It's just like, I don't know. He, like so many people are down on him now that I don't know that he's necessarily overrated, but I thought he was overrated before, and then people kind of came around to that opinion, so I'm not sure if it's fair to still hold him there or not. I honestly don't know, but we'll move on. For the Atlanta Hawks, John Collins. I feel like a lot of people act like John Collins is some like all-star player who's just limited by Atlanta's system. But I think John Collins is perfectly adequately used in Atlanta's system, and anything else would be just doing too much with a player who's not really of that tier. I'm aware Collins is capable of averaging 20 points on a bad team, but is him averaging 16 on well, I guess the Hawks have been bad this year, but the year before he averaged like 16 on a good team. Is that really holding him back, or is he just like actually contributing to winning basketball at that level, and anything more would just be inflated stats? That's how I feel about John Collins, essentially. For the Indiana Pacers, Karis LeVert, he's been really bad this year, but I was just of the opinion before that he was kind of overrated, and now he's kind of proven to be that, although I think part of that is injury, but I don't know, I just never really fully saw it with him. I think there was a lot of like, because he was a late first-round pick, we're going to treat him like he's actually better than he is, when in reality, he's just good for a late first-round pick. For the Detroit Pistons, this one hurts, and don't tell Nick, he can't know about this. I'm going to go with Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey is going to be a really, really good 3-and-D forward who will have some shot-creating ability, but I feel like he's leaned way too much in shot creating. And at best, the shot creating angle that he is going to reach is like a Marcus Morris type of shot creating, which is, yeah, he can do it, but you don't want him doing it a ton, but it's not nothing. But either way, I don't see like future all-star in Saddiq Bey's future. I see just really, 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 really good role player for a long period of time, but that's about it. For the Orlando Magic, I'm seeing a ton of people suggest that teams trade for Terrence Ross, but Terrence Ross has been bad this year, like really, really bad, and I don't know how many people are aware of how really, really bad he has been. So to that end, he is overrated. This video is going to be a lot fucking longer than I expected. The underrated video was like 15 minutes. It's because I have to explain why I think they're overrated, and no one really argues with you if you say someone's underrated, so yeah, that's why this one's longer, I guess. Sorry, Rudy. All right, the Western Conference actually has a couple of players that it actually kind of hurts me to say they're overrated, 2 in particular, and the first one is with the Phoenix Suns, Mikal Bridges. I feel like a lot of people project like this offensive potential on Bridges where he becomes like some 20-point scorer one day. Don't see that with him. Still an immaculate defender, fills his role very well offensively, but his numbers have been down a little bit offensively because I feel like he's been trying to do a little bit more than he probably should, and that's probably a byproduct of people saying he has that potential. Either way, Mikal Bridges' offensive stuff, I feel like some people act like his ceiling is a little bit higher than I would give it credit for, but this is once again kind of a case where I'm not so sure that he's actually that overrated. It's just there's really no one else on the Suns that I would give that label, so he kind of gets it, unfortunately. But don't come for me, Suns fans. Mikal Bridges is awesome. He has like alien arms. It's awesome to watch him play defense. They're like 9 feet long, I swear. For the Golden State Warriors, I went with 2 players here, and that is Andre Iguodala as well as James Wiseman. Iggy is shooting awfully this year, and I really feel like both Juan Toscano-Anderson and Otto Porter Jr. belong more in the rotation than they have been. Meanwhile, Iggy's getting like 22 minutes a game. I feel like, honestly, 11 more minutes for both of those guys is probably the better way to go. Although I have been given the impression that Otto Porter is just getting less minutes simply for the sake of maintaining his health, which makes sense. But at least come playoff time, if Andre Iguodala is still getting 20 minutes a game, I feel like that's a mistake. And then James Wiseman, I just don't see it with him potential-wise. Like, he's a big guy, and he shows kind of guard skills sometimes, but really I just don't see him being great enough at the big man stuff, and I don't see his guard skills that people tout, like the mid-range face-ups or the ball handling or anything like that. I don't see that as anything more than just a thing he could do occasionally and not a foundational piece to his game going forward. So I don't think James Wiseman is particularly special as a prospect, and I don't view him that highly. So yeah. For the Memphis Grizzlies, this is another case where I really couldn't pick anybody else, so I just had to go with Dillon Brooks. Dillon's defense is like kind of just 90% getting away with fouls, which, to be fair, there's a lot of defenders like that in the league where they just get this reputation and then they're suddenly allowed to play more aggressively because that's their reputation. It's a weird psychology thing with refs where it's also like players have a reputation of not really getting to the line and then they don't get foul calls when they really deserve it. Reputations can impact that kind of stuff, and Dillon Brooks has a reputation of a great defender, so he gets away with shit that he otherwise wouldn't. Another example would be like Patrick Beverley. So his defense is a little overrated for that reason, and in his offense, his efficiency is just never what you want it to be. And he shoots the ball a little bit too much, and if he could just cut out like 3 bad shots a game, his efficiency would probably be around league average, but he just doesn't do that. So the most overrated player on the Grizzlies, but I still think not that overrated, I would say. For the Utah Jazz, holy shit, Jordan Clarkson has been bad this year. And in general, I think players of Jordan Clarkson's archetype are almost universally overrated. Jamal Crawford before this, Lou Williams before that. Or not before Jamal Crawford, he was after Jamal Crawford, but you get my point. The shot-chucking 6th man small guard who doesn't play defense, doesn't play make, and all he really does is shoot the ball. Maybe he does a fancy dribble every once in a while. Never thought that type of player was particularly impactful, and he is a disciple of that type of player, and he's just not that great. And he's been even worse this year as his efficiency metrics are fucking awful. So Jordan Clarkson, not very good. For the Dallas Mavericks, this is another one that hurts because I'm a big fan of his. Tim Hardaway Jr., another player whose efficiency has just been fucking god-awful this year. It's really just a matter of the shots not going in, and to be fair to him, the Dallas Mavericks as a whole are kind of struggling to put the ball in the basket, especially from outside. But he seems to be the worst among them in that category, and it's not great because just a year ago we were like, wow, the Kristaps Porzingis trade was actually the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, but then Kristaps Porzingis has been better than him this year, so it's kind of like it's teetering back to what it originally was because Tim has not been great. For the Denver Nuggets, another one that hurts, especially because it's an overrated by me, and that is Monte Morris. Monte Morris, I thought was going to straight up average like 18, 19 points per game, as well as like 6, 7 assists in the starting role that he has been receiving, although he hasn't started every game, I don't believe. But I just knew he'd have more of a role offensively than what he did before because of Jamal Murray out for an entire year and Michael Porter Jr. going down. And he's averaged a few more points per game, but hasn't been the extravagant leap that I was expecting. For the Los Angeles Lakers, you guys already all know how I feel about Anthony Davis, although not as overrated as I would have thought him to be before because it seems like a lot of people have turned on Anthony Davis and almost pushed it further than I would even go in terms of him being overrated. So again, this might be like a Julius Randle example where I was saying he was overrated before, and then now so many people have gone with that take that I don't know if he's actually that overrated anymore. And I saw a lot of people acting like the Lakers would be better off without Anthony Davis. That's ludicrous. The only argument that I would make was that he was just not performing at the level that we expect him to. But to say that they're better without him or something like that, that was a step too far for sure. For the Los Angeles Clippers, again, someone that was overrated by me, Terrence Mann. I was really hoping for a Terrence Mann breakout season where he averaged like 16, 17 points per game on good efficiency and was really good defensively, and just like the Clippers needed guys to step up in the scoring department, and you know, Marcus Morris was a possibility, Eric Bledsoe, Reggie Jackson, and then obviously Paul George before that. But Terrence Mann kind of just averaged a few more points than he did the season before. It was kind of an example similar to Monte Morris, where I projected this big leap and the big leap did not happen. So he got overrated by me. The fan base in general, I don't know that he's that overrated, but yeah, probably not. But I'm just pointing out where I was wrong, I suppose. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, I really could not think of anyone here. I previously would have said D'Angelo Russell because his offensive efficiency was bad and his defense was bad. His offensive efficiency is still bad, but his defense has been so many miles better than it has been previous to his career. So I can't really say he's overrated anymore. I guess I went with Naz Reid because I just feel like the Timberwolves would be better with a more defensive-minded backup big, but ultimately, he's probably underrated by the average NBA fan. I'd just say maybe a little overrated by a Timberwolves fan. Nah, I don't even like that pick. I don't have a pick for the Timberwolves. Moving on. For the Portland Trailblazers, Robert Covington has been disappointing for them pretty much ever since they traded for him. His three ball, at one point it seemed like he was one of the more slept on shooters in the league, but his efficiency from three has continued to be pretty mediocre. That said, I would still like my team to trade for him. But his defense has not been as impactful as you would like it to be, as impactful as it was in Minnesota when he was there. But Robert Covington, defense not as great, three-point efficiency not as good as it seemed like it could be early in his career, so overrated. For the Kings, I hate to say this about a rookie, but Davion Mitchell, I feel like his efficiency problems have gone under the radar. Now, I'm not going to shit on him too much because it's a rookie and it's a small guard, so I don't have too many fears. I'm sure he'll figure it out, and his defense is obviously immaculate for such a small player. But his offense is just it goes in when his shot's going in. You kind of get like a Kemba Walker vibe from him. It doesn't help that, or it helps that he's a small guard who wears number 15. I believe Davion wears number 15, right? I'm pretty sure. But also nights where it looks like Knicks Kemba Walker previous to being benched. So Davion just not efficient right now, but I'm not too concerned long-term wise. For the Spurs, I couldn't really think of anybody, so I just threw down Lonnie Walker, but honestly, I don't know how many people are really overrating Lonnie Walker. The only reason I really say him is more of like historically, a lot of Spurs fans acted like he was going to be some amazing player, and I never saw that. And then he ended up not being that. So I was kind of right about that, but I don't think too many Spurs fans are like, oh my God, Lonnie Walker at this point. So probably not even really him. For the New Orleans Pelicans, I went with both Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jackson Hayes. Both of them just are not good NBA players, and it feels like the Pelicans, some Pelicans fans, even people outside of the fan base who aren't really aware are just kind of like holding on hope that those players are going to be really good. I just don't see it with either of them. Jackson Hayes is like a really fun athletic player, but his actual impact is almost zero and arguably a negative impact. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the shots just don't go in. Like, I don't care how pretty your moves are if the shots don't go in. And he's kind of a textbook example of $1 million move, 10-cent finish, and it happens all the time with him. And at a certain point, that's just the player that he is. Not completely dismissing both of these guys because they're still young, but I have little hope with them in terms of what level of prospect they're really going to end up being long term. For the Thunder, this is the most painful one to say, and I would have put it in the thumbnail if it wasn't so hard. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been really not that amazing this year. He's still good, don't get me wrong, but his efficiency metrics have plummeted, and I feel like that's gone under the radar. I especially hate to say this because one of my favorite Twitter follows is 3Cone, and he talks about Shai all the time and how he should be an all-star. I'm gonna be real, dog, with how poor his efficiency has been on the season as a whole, and with the Thunder obviously not being good, he's just not an all-star yet. Now, no way does this reflect how I feel about Shea going forward. I think Shea is going to be a perennial all-star talent. And before this season, I would have called him underrated. No, he's been not great this year. And he's still good, but his efficiency has really dipped from being amazing last year to pretty shit this year. And last but not least, another just not that efficient guard. I'm going to go with Kevin Porter Jr. This is a player who's been kind of overrated within my friend group, specifically a lot of draft guys. Unfortunately, at a certain point, the shots need to start going in. And again, I'm saying this is all these younger players. I'm not dismissing the possibility that the shots eventually do go in, but as of right now, they're missing so much that I can't continue to project this to be like some great player long-term and now. And Kevin Porter Jr. has not been efficient for his entire career, and at a certain point, I need to see the shots go in to actually really see the vision, and they still haven't yet. So that's Kevin Porter Jr. And that is who I believe the most overrated player on every team is. This video is supposed to go out on a Wednesday, but honestly, it's 4 o'clock at the time of recording, and this video file is almost 30 minutes, so I wouldn't be surprised if Rudy cannot get this out on time and it goes up on Thursday. If that's the case, RIP, I guess. But yeah, that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and cue the outro music.